I'm convinced that the way that you consume books will determine how you feel about this one. A Little Life is polarizing. Tons of people love it, tons of people hate it. I believe the ones who love it consume the whole book. I believe the ones who hate it just focused on the trauma. And there was a lot of trauma. This book will test you for sure. But we can do hard things. Books like this alert us to the fact that life is not always pretty. And I feel like the very least we can do is listen to someone's story. Because in fiction, there's always truth. And this is someone's story. It is someone's truth. The first video review that I saw of A Little Life was hysterical. I don't mean like laughing hysterical. I mean like the young lady, the booktuber, was literally hysterical. She must have finished the book and just turned on her camera and let it all out in that video. She could not understand why anybody would write this book. I take book reviews with a grain of salt because typically I have found the things that I like are very specific to me. And I think that most people are that way, but a lot of people rely on others to tell them what they should read, tell them what they should watch. They expect book reviews to tell them what they should read. That is not how I consume books. In fact, there's no one set way that I consume books. I typically will pay attention to the reviews of books that I'm probably already interested in, or I follow people who tend to read the same types of topics that I do. And if I had listened to a lot of the reviews of A Little Life, I would never have read this book. So I'm glad that I didn't. I'm making this video prematurely because I am about, 80% done with this book. It's funny because I started reading it last year in earnest, and I was really enjoying it. So far, this is my first book from Hanya Yanagihara, and I have no other points of reference, but from this book, I know that I like her writing style, or at least I like it in this book. If this is how her books read, I will probably read others. But it's a brick of a book. It's very big. That's first and foremost. This book is 816 pages. And if you watch my content and you follow me, you know that last year I read two books. And I read them in January, and they were very small books. They were great books. That is all that I read last year. Ooh, correction. I actually read 3 books. I read Bonjour Tristesse, I read Recitative, and I read The Ice Palace by Tarjei Veses. Bonjour Tristesse was by Francois Sagan, and Recitative was by Toni Morrison. Also, I don't have these books in any of these covers. I didn't even know they existed. I miscalculated and said 2 because I thought that I read Bonjour Tristesse in 2024. Apparently, I did not. I don't have a reading goal this year. Last year, I set my reading goal based on what I read the previous year. In 2024, I read 28 books, I think. I feel like that's right. And my goal was 25. And that was a good reading year, at least in terms of quantity of books. That was a good reading year. So I set my reading goal to 30 because I read 28, and I'm like, okay, I can add 2 more. I read 2 books. I read them in January. They were great books, and that was all I read for the entire year. 2025 was a year for me. So very tumultuous, very up and down, as a lot of people know. So it tracks that I went into a reading slump, and this is the book that I decided to read to get out of my reading slump. I did try other books. Nothing stuck. I tried some crazy books, y'all. Nothing stuck. And I just remembered the reviews of this book and how everyone that I have watched review this book, the reviews that I read on Goodreads, people that I know who have read the book, I listened to what they had to say. And thank goodness I read it for myself. I'm making this video for a couple of reasons. One, because this is me being back to posting videos. I've decided to start posting videos at the end of the month on January, or this might go up February 1st. Decided to give myself the month because I had quite a year, as I said. I did attempt to do a form of Vlogmas. I did the first like 12 days. And it was a form of Vlogmas, and that was cool. But I had grandsons here over the holidays. And so I decided that my holiday was going to start when the grandsons went home. They went home on, we took them back to California on the 8th of this month, and it is now the 29th as of this filming. And so this last really week and a half, I have just done as little as possible, piddling around the house. We have had this crazy snow with this crazy ice, and if I were younger, I would be sledding down all of the backyards in my neighborhood right now because we've got quite the obstacle course here. And I know that if I were a kid, this would be so much fun. Sledding down the hill. I'm looking at a hill and it is straight ice, and I know that that would just be incredible. So I am enjoying winter and the snow and this reset. I decided that I wasn't going to tackle anything major, do too much of anything until after January because I didn't get a vacation. I had a fever dream of a Christmas holiday because I had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they were both boys. And I had them for almost 3 weeks here. And by the time I took them back and came back home, I was exhausted and realized that, like, now my vacation can start. That is definitely a privilege. It is a privilege that I'm fully embracing. I have a couple more days until this month is over, but since we are pretty much iced in, and we're not, like, the roads are clear now and you can drive and all that, but there's projected snowstorms coming again. I am embracing every bit of this cold, this winter, this quiet, the serene nature of winter, which has been perfect coming off of a 4-day trip to LA, which is home and which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I'll insert some clips here. Yeah, I am living my little life. And if this book has taught me nothing else, it's taught me that you have to live life while you can. I finished the book. And I had a whole other video that I actually filmed. I had three videos that I filmed. 2, I lost the footage, and 1, it was just to get it out. And honestly, I couldn't even rant about the book because I was ranting about how people who write reviews seem so immature and just emotionally unintelligent. And you usually know that that's coming when you read a review and it starts off, "I don't see how anybody liked this book." Well, I don't need you to see how I like the book because I have my own eyes. A Little Life is a hard book. It is a hard book, and that's pretty much what I wrote on my review on Goodreads. If you want to follow me on Goodreads, I'm Bella on Goodreads. I'll leave a link in the description. I wrote that it's a hard book. It's very hard, and yet that doesn't stop it from being a beautifully written book because that's genuinely how I feel. What I usually do when I talk about a book is I tell you how it made me feel, and I tell you who I think it's for, and I tell you who I think it's not for. So this book, the writing made me feel as if I was right there. Like I was in the kitchen when they're chopping up the onions. Like I was crying right along with them. That's literally how it made me feel. And I can't tell you when was the last time a book has made me feel as if I was in the mix, as if I was a part of the book. but that's how it made me feel. I loved the characters, not the bad ones so much, but I loved the main characters, the people who did what they were supposed to do. Even the gray character, I loved him too. I believe that I felt as much love for our main character as all of the people did around him. And I found myself wanting to love him into loving himself like they did. And that is the premise of the book. That is one of the premises of the book, because there are a lot of messages in this book. There's messages about family. Is family blood or is it chosen? Friendship. Do you trust people or don't you? Love, in all its forms. There's also lots of talk about art, and I'm an artist, so of course that appealed to me. But Hanya Yanagihara, like, can do a description like no other description I think I've ever, like no other author I think I've ever read. And I could be wrong about that, but she just drew me in. She let you know when she was speaking about a certain character based on what it is that they did in life and who they were. So when she spoke about JB the artist, she talked about like how he saw light and how the light made the people on the train look. Like those are the types of things that I crave when I read books. Something that is going to resonate with me, something that is going to take an experience that I may have had or a way of life or a part of my life and pull me in and say, hey, what do you know about this? We can relate because I'm going to talk about this and I think you'll be interested. That's how I felt. I felt like she was like, take my hand. Let me take you into this world. Let me introduce you to these people. And one of the beautiful things about that is I don't often remember characters in books, but the way that she talked about these characters and introduced you to them and fleshed them out, the majority of them anyway, I know these characters. I feel like they're my friends. I feel like they're my family. I feel like I know them. I know their homes and their surroundings and the things that they think are important and their jobs and what they do best. Malcolm, the architect who designs Jude's house, and JB, who he is a painter and he can't stop painting the people in his life. Willem, the actor, who, like, I can imagine what his face looks like on a billboard. Like, she does that in her writing, and that drew me in. But she's also very descriptive. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you are, she's very descriptive of the traumatic parts as well. And so I can see how that could turn people off. I understand that it's not for everyone. I understand that it has a lot of ugly scenes and there are a lot of bad parts, but I don't get the label trauma PRN because honestly, you don't even get to those parts, like really get into those parts until like almost halfway through the book. It's an 816-page book, and you're pretty much through page 400 before you start really getting into the nitty gritty of what this book is about and what actually happens to our main character. And that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that things aren't alluded to. That doesn't mean that there aren't traumatic things at the beginning, but you really are in the middle of the book when you really discover those things. And then, of course, from the middle to the end of the book, life is life. And if you haven't lived life, you're probably not going to be able to relate to anything. If you have lived life, but you're not healed, you know, you've had some trauma, but you're not healed, it might be triggering. But if you're someone who is open to like hearing someone's story, even if it's painful, and trying to find empathy for other human beings, then this book is for you. You can't be thin-skinned while you're reading it. But also, if you're like me, I kind of read books the way that I listen to music. And it's going to feel like I'm drifting off subject, but I'm not. when I listen to music, when some people listen to music, they listen to the beat. They dance to the beat. That's all they hear. They don't know the lyrics. They don't know anything. Some people will listen to a song and all they focus on is the lyrics. Like they relate to the lyrics. I am the worst at polishing my nails. They relate to the lyrics. And the lyrics draw them in. And if the lyrics are bad, they really can't relate to the song. I don't listen like that. When I listen to music, I hear the harmonies, the melodies, the beat. I hear the syncopation because sometimes that's present. If it's orchestral music, I hear the strings, I hear the woodwinds, I hear the percussion. You know, um, if it's something sampled, I hear the sample. I typically hear other samples that have been slipped in under it to make it more robust because they do that. All of the little sounds, the ad libs, everything. That is how I listen to music. I am a very musically inclined person. I come from a very musically inclined family. That's how I listen to music. That's also how I read books. So focusing on just the trauma, it can never be me. That's not how I consume books. That is why I don't consume books based on who wrote them, what color they are, what their background is. I can't consume books that way. When I consume a book, I consume it in its entirety. I don't just get stuck on the dialogue. I don't just get stuck on the plot. I need to know the characters. I need to know the setting. I need that rich language that real true authors who draw you in, who pull you in, who say, come into my world. That is what I need from a book. So I can't speak for the people who only focused on the trauma and didn't see the beauty. But for me, a book has to be a symphony. All of the parts matter. And that's what this was. It was a very well orchestrated symphony. Did it have a couple of problems? Yeah, there are a couple of things. I felt like the ending was rushed. And it was 800 pages. So you're like, well, how can the ending be rushed? I don't know. I felt like we tried to squeeze a lot into that middle section or the middle to the end section. And then when we got to the end, it was just kind of like, oh, well, and then this happened and that's that. And I was like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. I have some questions, right? I always have questions though. But um, it left me knowing, but still having questions. And I can't really ask those questions here or talk about that because that would be a spoiler, and I don't want to spoil it for you. Very human story about friendships, about four young men pretty much who have known each other since college, and one young man in particular who they all kind of rally around. And the people who come into their lives, but primarily his life, Jude, the main character, and all of the people who love him and love each other and just want nothing but the best for each other, but also understand that at the end of the day, they're only human. Uh, the things that happen in the book that are terrible, they happen in real life. And I think once you realize that, you can realize how even if you hate this book to your core, and there were parts that made me very angry, made me really want to hit something. Definitely wanted to take a whack at Weezer. Real comic relief there. But um, I would never disrespect a book like this in a review with this subject matter by saying that it was a bad book or awful or terrible because it hurt my feelings. Because is that for me would be unthinkable. It just so happened that I enjoyed the entirety of the symphony that this book is, and I respect it, and I respect that Hanya Yanagihara wrote it. And my heart goes out to people who have ever experienced anything close to the trauma that was written in this book. That's pretty much my review of the book because I have, because I'm still processing and I might have to gather my thoughts when it comes to this book because it was a lot. But I will say that if you like a good story and you are open and objective, and you can see beyond the hard parts to get the message, which is live your life and love the people around you and check on your strong friends and your weak ones. You can get those messages and several others that I didn't go into. This is the book for you. On that note, I'm going to love you and leave you. And like, subscribe, comment, let's discuss in the comments. Do all the things. I will see you in the next video.